Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and I am broadcasting today from Mexico, where I'm at a week-long retreat. And so hopefully the electricity stays on, the Wi-Fi stays on, so I can do the whole entire live stream. So fingers crossed, everything works. So what I'm going to be talking about today is talking about how big of a transformation generative AI is. And in particular, is this real? Is it going to be really transformational? Or is it going to be like blockchain and Web3, which are great technologies, but didn't exactly live up to its revolutionary promise when it first came on the scene? So is generative AI like that? Or is it much more like some of the big, huge, sweeping technologies like the internet, like social, like mobile? So how do we need to prepare for this is what I want to talk about today. And just to give away the headline here, I think this is one of the most transformational things I've ever seen. I've been in business and technology now for 30 years, starting in 1993 when I graduated from business school and went into newspapers because I could see that the internet was happening and that the newspapers and information and media was going to be disrupted. I wanted to be in the middle of that. So I've had this very privileged front row seat to some of the biggest disruptions that technology has brought to the world. And I wanted to talk about that today and just give a little bit of perspective about what was so transformational about these past technology waves, what wasn't, and how that's informing me to help me think about how this is going to be transformative too with generative AI. So let's begin. So 30 years ago, I started a job almost exactly 30 years ago at the San Jose Mercury News because I believe the internet could really disrupt everything. And just to give you some perspective, the month I graduated from school was also the month when the World Wide Web, the browser, was invented and brought to the world by Tim Berners-Lee. So it was happening then. And what I realized was that the cost of information being distributed was going to go down to virtually zero. And that would put into jeopardy the business models of so many businesses, especially media. It would change the way they work marketing. It would change the way that we would communicate. And it definitely has. I mean, could you imagine a world when we didn't have any of these tools available? So when we realized that that was going to happen, that's when I wanted to go into the web and into the internet to explore what that world would look like. And so again, had my hands deep into putting newspapers online through the early 90s, mid 90s, late 90s, and then started looking at search engines. And people were scoffing at it early on to say, like, why would you want to buy traffic? Because it was mostly small and medium sized businesses that had, frankly, no marketing budgets, no ability to reach people. So big businesses and advertisers and agencies were like, search engines, that's so bourgeois. So let's not go play with that. And then you could see the power of that. And you're starting to shift the way advertising and how audiences were being bought. And then we saw social, and so many people dismiss social media as a fad. Oh, I'm sorry. I just realized that my banner isn't here. So please share where you're coming from, and also what are some of the transformative ways that you're planning to use generative AI. And so social was a fad, but it changed how we communicated and it shifted the power dynamic of how we actually connect. And so, sorry, my hair, sorry, the cost of connection and the cost of maintaining and starting relationships fundamentally changed because of social media. And the cost of mass media, the ability to have direct communications and not have to go through marketing and advertising to establish a relationship, also fundamentally changed how we have our relationships with each other and with our brands. So, and then it also social changed the way that we have our relationships, period. The culture and societal changes as a result of social media, for better and also for worse. Because when the cost of information goes down, the value and ability to spread disinformation or to spread your messages are, it basically, it was a huge boon for disinformation. And then we had mobile, the ability to just reduce the cost of place and location, just fundamentally changing it when you can take that computing power with you anywhere and everywhere, fundamentally changes our relationship with technology. And now we have generative AI, and that is fundamentally reducing the power of logic, of cognition, of computing, and of the cost of creativity. And so all of those things that were the domain of knowledge workers are now again becoming much more automated and augmented because of generative AI. So we've seen a huge explosion of activity over the last 8 months. Again, artificial intelligence has been around for 20 years. But what we saw with generative AI, because of that little chat box, we saw the democratization of this technology, putting that power of artificial intelligence into the hands of anybody who can type into the keyboard. And so we've seen a huge rise in startup financing. I live in San Francisco, and it is a little bit crazy right now with people just talking about generative AI all the time. So it's good for me to get out of that bubble for a little bit. There are meetings and conferences, and we see technology companies incorporating AI into their existing tech platforms. It's just changing so quickly. So I believe that we're at an inflection point here in that we need to figure out how artificial intelligence fits into our business and otherwise risk falling behind our competitors, losing our talent, or becoming even possibly obsolete. So I don't want to overstate that this isn't going to happen overnight, but it is happening and a lot faster, I think, than we're prepared for it to happen. So I want us to take a look and learn from the lessons of the past, and also learn from some of the failures of, for example, the dot-com era, when people started playing with the technology without having a firm business plan behind it. And to learn from that and be able to think strategically, intentionally, to be able to create the kind of change we want to see versus having the technology take over and us to have those unintended consequences that we come along the way. So just want to say hi to Chris. Thank you for joining us today. And again, please share that you're on the stream, ask any questions that you may have, and also please share, what are some of the transformations that you're anticipating seeing over the next few months, years, because of generative AI. So I'm going to talk about 4 big transformational changes that I'm watching very carefully. And the first one is changes in how we're going to experience the customer experience created because of generative AI. And also the expectations that we have now, because we know that this is possible. How is that going to change our experiences when we engage with a company or with an institution? So, for example, we already have so much of AI in chatbots, and they're pretty awful. If you ever use one of these chatbots going to your bank or to a retailer, you ask a question and it doesn't really give you answers. It just kind of steers you towards the frequently asked questions page that's most appropriate for you. But as it becomes better and smarter, a lot of these customer service chatbots and tools and platforms are understanding what you're saying, using generative AI to respond as if it was a person, a human, and respond back in a logical way and finding the answers and putting it right in front of you. So it's going to be a great tool to surface what I call the less frequently asked questions and to be able to actually answer your question, but based on the quality of your questions and not based on rules and processes written by somebody, because we can't anticipate every single question that you may have. We'll see a lot more personalized experiences too as well, because the cost of computing is going to go down with generative AI. If I ask for a certain thing and in a certain way, and you know the history of my experience with you, you can then put all of that information into generative AI and literally generate an entire page of content, of products, of services that are geared totally to me and not to a generic persona. So I do believe we're going to see some extraordinary, extraordinary advances in customer experience. And frankly, we as consumers are going to expect it the more and more we experience generative AI ourselves. The second transformative area is around productivity. And there's been a lot of question and concerns around who's going to be impacted by all of this. And I like to say that generative AI won't replace humans, But humans with generative AI tools will replace humans without generative AI tools. And so we'll need fewer people who are doing the tasks and activities today. And the analogy that some people have said is that this is going to be like when ATMs came along. We didn't necessarily get rid of all the bank tellers. We converted them from being bank tellers that were handling transactions to becoming financial advisors. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it's not necessarily the same people. So I'll give you an example, just from that customer experience example that I gave before, customer service. Right now, we're seeing an advance in automation in call centers where the marginal cost of conversing with customers is virtually zero because of these automated tools. So we're seeing somebody has estimated that their call centers are going to drop by 50, 60, even 70% because of these tools. And that is going to impact the employees who oftentimes staff our call centers who are from the most disadvantaged parts of our society. And so it's going to require reskilling of that workforce, a huge turnover and change. And that takes time and energy on the part of the employer. And also takes a willingness of that employee to want to reskill. Again, maybe becoming a prompt engineer. That may be similar in terms of the pay and responsibilities, but very different in terms of skills. So, agreed that new jobs would be created, but they won't necessarily be filled by the people whose jobs will be impacted unless we're very thoughtful and intentional about the reskilling that takes place inside of our organizations and potentially with the help of government support. So, thinking about productivity, I think there are huge gains to be made, but we also need to be thinking about the human aspect of that, the human impact of what that means to our organizations, and to be very transparent as leaders in thinking about how we're going to help that change come about. Because it could potentially happen very, very quickly, and the impact to our organizations could be tremendous. The third area is in our strategies. It's going to transform not just what we do and how we do it, but how we deliver on our mission and our goals and our objectives. So, what kinds of products and services will we offer? What will this enable? What will make things obsolete because of this technology? And how will it change our business models because of the ways that we can fundamentally change the cost structure because of those productivity gains? So I'll give you an example. One of the things that this technology is really good at is coding. So it can write code with you just saying, I need code that can do this. And it's getting to the point where even people like me who don't have a strong background in engineering can actually write code and create things. So I think in the near future, we won't need a huge number of engineers or costly, very pricey consultants to create the technology that businesses need to advance. So I can see a day where even a small nonprofit can leverage this technology in general, because of generative AI, to better be able to deliver on its mission. And that is going to fundamentally change what allows them to do, what their strategy is going to be. So it's really this democratization and access to not just generative AI, but to the power of technology to transform businesses. So I'll give an example of in the past during the dot-com, how some companies did a good job of this and others didn't. So we know about Amazon coming in and really changing the way that books were being sold, for example. And Barnes& and Noble, the largest bookseller, retail brick and mortar bookseller, said, sure, we can do this. We'll just put the internet up, have a web interface to our existing storefronts. We would just fulfill through our stores. And that just didn't work. The internet is fundamentally different, the expectations, the speed, the breadth of inventory. And so Barnes& and Noble had to take that down and really build their e-commerce from scratch with inventory and everything else really configured for this new business model. So that's just one example from the dot-com era of how we couldn't just put this technology in front of our existing business model. We really had to rethink the way that our business actually works and make some fundamental, huge transformational changes to how we ran our business. So I think that's the overall strategy is going to change. but we're also going to see our strategy processes change. I've talked in the past about the need to have agile strategy planning processes. For example, going from an annual process to a quarterly process for planning and budgeting, and looking at your execution plan over a longer period, not just a fixed 12-month period, but a rolling 18-month, 6-quarter walk where you're updating your plan every single quarter and extending it another 18 months. Because while things are changing very quickly, you also need to have this longer term vision of what you are trying to build to today. Otherwise, you're just building things for the next quarter, and that's not going to give you that strategic point of view. So, this is all the more important when we're thinking about generative AI. And the last area I would say of big transformation. So we've had the customer experience and expectations, we've had productivity and the human factor, the workforce issues, strategy, and the fourth is culture. Uh, Basically, when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we're welcoming a whole entire new entity into the workforce. We're going to have coworkers, colleagues, co-pilots sitting at our side, and knowing how to work with them, how to integrate them, literally how to have a relationship, a healthy relationship with artificial intelligence with every single employee, because every employee is going to probably be impacted by this in one way or another, is really important. So, what does it mean to have an AI as an assistant? And what does it mean for a doctor to have an artificial intelligent assistant in the room with the patients? And it requires this commitment to transparency of how we're using this, of accountability for each person to say, I'm going to use this technology in a responsible way, and also not to treat it as just another technology, because the questions that we're going to be asking of this, the level of trust we need to develop with this technology for it to be truly effective, is at a different level than just using a technology like a collaboration software or a customer relationship management software or a sales tool. Those are great tools, but in many ways, we're treating these new technologies as something we're going to depend on as much as we would want to depend on a colleague. So the questions are, how are we going to thrive with this technology? What kind of culture we're going to build around this? And the reality is we need to think about the culture changes and the kind of culture we want to build around being responsible users of artificial intelligence. The ethics, the questions we want to be asking, those are the things that we want to be training our employees from the very beginning right now. So I have three things to prepare. And so first of all, I want to say, William, thank you for joining from South Africa, I can say. So thank you very much for joining. Again, I encourage you to ask any questions or have any comments. And also, if you don't agree with me, that you think, this is a very interesting technology, but it's not going to be that transformative or it's not going to happen that quickly. And we don't know for sure how quickly it's going to be, but I see the potential behind it, these transformations that could potentially happen. And I do think that we need to be prepared. So there are three things I would say that we need to prepare as disruption and transformative leaders. The first one is we need to learn, we need to embrace, and we need to integrate and co pilot these technologies as much as possible into the work that we do every single day. And this requires a high level of experimentation. Instead of saying, well, I don't think it could ever be as good as a human, well, how good can it be? How much can it do? What is it capable of now? And truly understanding it and taking it all with a big grain of salt, but also being aware and being more comfortable doing experiments constantly and encouraging people in your organization to do those experiments. Now that's not going to happen unless you as a leader create the structure and the frameworks and the guardrails to be able to do this in a safe and acceptable way. So that is probably the most important thing we can do as leaders today. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't really know how transformative it's going to be, but we need to start asking the questions to see how is it going to impact our customer experience, our productivity, our strategy, and our culture. and doing experiments every single day, up and down throughout the organization, to figure out just what exactly does this look like. Let's see. I have a comment from James here, from Jay, that Semaphore sponsored a 3-hour seminar on workforce and artificial intelligence. Agency and trust are key and integral to empowerment. So that's great. And he just adds another comment here: co-pilot is synonymous with empowerment. That's a great point. That that what we're talking about here is truly enabling our employees up and down throughout the organization to have agency, to take the ability to use these technologies to do their jobs better, and for them to figure it out rather than it come from up high or from I call the inner sanctum of artificial intelligence technology. And the more that we put the power of this technology into people's hands, democratize it, make it accessible, the sooner we're going to figure out what can actually work or not. And I think that's one of the most transformative aspects of generative AI, is that anybody can pretty much use it. And so that's so the first one is for leaders to really learn, embrace, and create this culture of experimentation. The second thing is to move this out of the technology space. Many organizations have a group of people who are looking at artificial intelligence, but for the most part, a vast majority of them are in the technology space. And it's run by technologists, it's with your chief information officer, and they're not necessarily having and taking a business and transformational point of view. So, as fast as you can, as soon as you can, set up an artificial intelligence center of excellence, something that is cross functional, looks across the organization, is being led by somebody who's charged with thinking strategically about artificial intelligence, and is coordinating all of these experiments across the organization. You want to build the structure for artificial intelligence to come up and be spread throughout the entire organization, but also that structure to be coordinated and strategic and intentional about what you're trying to do with it. And the third thing is to provide education and training for every single employees. It's sort of like what Jay was taking about how talking about how there's education now that you can take. What are the most bare minimums that you feel people need to understand about how to use technologies like this, so that they can stay safe? So, for example, in OpenAI, in ChatGPT, there's a little lever inside of settings that allows you to make sure that the chats aren't saved and that the prompts that you put in are not fed back into the engine. So, just universally making sure that people understand that, making sure you have the agreements in place if you are have privacy issues, that people understand what you can put in, what you can ask, what you can't, and so just having the most basic education and training for people so that if they do use it for their jobs, they're ready and they understand how they need to be responsible in their use of this artificial intelligence. And how do they think about asking the right questions? Again, it's not about knowing all of the answers at this point, but to ask the right questions about responsible AI. Just because we can do this doesn't mean that we should. So the mistakes, I think, and the errors that we're seeing happening right now are when people use it and intentionally just think it's good, not understanding that they need to double check. Um, all those basic things that we think are kind of intuitive, people just may not know. So education and training for every single employee who could potentially be using these tools in their jobs is absolutely essential. So that's what I have for today. The thing that I really want to impart is I do think that this is a hugely transformational technology, in that we need to think strategically and to prepare for it right now. Because if we don't, we're going to be caught off guards, and not able to leverage this really powerful technology. So next week I will be back. I will be back in the US. And also I'll be talking more about this technology, generative AI, what it is, what it isn't, and what is it becoming. So I'm going to do a series of talks around AI around this. I'll be talking about the technology stack for artificial intelligence. I'm bringing some of the good frameworks that some people are pulling together around this. And so I'm going to dive deep into what it is, what it isn't, and also what it's becoming and how do we make good use of it. So until then, stay safe, practice, use it as much as you can, and please always stay in touch and let me know how you're using these tools to drive disruption and transformation. All right, take care, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.